Okay, guys, we're going to get started if we can, please. Doug, can I ask you to call the roll?
Good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you. Commissioner Alvarado. Yes, sir. Commissioner Burke. Here. Commissioner Butler. Commissioner Dunn. Present. Commissioner Guardino. Present. Commissioner Kehoe. Commissioner Norton. Commissioner Van Konynenberg. Here. Chair Inman.
Here.
Senator Bell. Assemblymember Frazier. Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, so if you all will bear with me, we're going to do a little agenda hopping today. So if you'll go first to item 73, please.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. Tab 73 is an informational item. SB 1 dedicated a total of $120 million for Caltrans to implement an advanced mitigation program with the intent to streamline project delivery. Amy Bailey with the Caltrans Division of Environmental Analysis is here to provide an update on their efforts on advanced mitigation and will discuss the recently completed annual report to the Commission.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning. Secretary, Director, thank you for having me. I'm happy to present a brief update, as Garth mentioned, regarding the Caltrans Advanced Mitigation Program. As a bit of background, the Road Repair and Accountability Act of 2017 and the Streets and Highway Code now reflects an established advanced mitigation program and a separate account that will have a set aside of $30 million annually for 4 years to develop mitigation intended to meet future transportation project mitigation requirements. Advanced mitigation is a shift in our business practice of planning and implementing natural resource mitigation requirements for a project rather than on a project-by-project basis at the time of project permitting or just before project construction to well before project delivery to seek to accelerate project delivery and meet regional or watershed conservation goals and objectives. Today, I'll share our progress on establishing the program and our progress and plans for moving the program forward. Prior to the Advanced Mitigation Program being established in 2017, we had 13 pilot projects that were programmed in the 2016 SHOP. They are all in various stages of delivery and represent a suite of options for advanced mitigation project types that are also allowable under the new program. Implementing these advanced mitigation projects, as we have been setting up the new program established by SB 1, has really helped inform how we can be successful in delivering these projects. It's helped in identifying challenges and has highlighted the various regulatory procedures and approaches that require adaptations or modifications to accommodate this new approach. We have also come to agreement with the 7 natural resource agencies outlined on this slide for planning and implementation that identifies specific engagement points early and throughout the advanced mitigation project delivery process. It is worth noting that the California Coastal Commission is a new member of the statewide Advanced Mitigation Initiative MOU and has signed this new master implementing agreement. This agreement is in the final stages, obtaining signatures, and only needs to be signed by 2 more of the agencies to be finalized. This has been a great collaborative effort and accomplishment that will help support us moving forward with the resource agency coordination and implementing advanced mitigation projects. The advanced mitigation guidelines have been finalized and posted to the advanced mitigation website and distributed to our group of interested parties. They cover the following areas and establish the guidelines and processes by which the department will implement the program. The main topics include advanced mitigation background, program objectives and statutory requirements, program roles and responsibilities, really highlighting the headquarters, district, local transportation agencies, and California Department of Fish and Wildlife roles. Has a program schedule, funding and advanced mitigation account information, advanced mitigation project planning, eligibility, programming, and delivery processes. It has a chapter on coordination and communication, tracking use, and reporting requirements. Key inputs were received from the Commission and through our public meetings and comment period on the draft guidelines that have been incorporated into the final guidelines. A summary of the changes between the draft and the final guidelines is available on our website for further detail. The 2019 biennial report to the legislature will highlight the planning process and progress we've made towards identifying advanced mitigation projects. In addition to the accomplishments I outlined previously in the previous slides for the process agreement and with the resource agencies, we have also completed the statewide needs assessment, which assesses the need for mitigation statewide on the 10-year SHOP and forecasted anticipated impacts on habitats and species. We held a webinar, and this has been distributed publicly. 7 districts have begun to evaluate the statewide assessment information and to identify areas for regional assessments. The advanced mitigation account has been established, and the first 2 installments of $30 million have been made, and the account has been set up to gain interest. An annual report to the Commission has also been submitted, and it's identified in Streets and Highway Codes as an annual requirement of the program. The contents of the report are very similar to what I outlined in the legislative report. Working with Commission staff, we identified the main elements of the report as we move forward. The Commission can expect the report to provide details on the financial activity within the advanced mitigation account, a list of STIP and SHOP transportation projects that have used advanced mitigation developed from the program, and the amount and type of mitigation credits established and sold by the advanced mitigation program. As I mentioned previously, we presented the informal guidelines in June 2018, and we received a lot of the input through that process and have also finalized the guidelines. So as we move forward, we have 10 districts doing regional advanced mitigation needs assessment planning, and we are looking forward to our first programming cycle in summer 2020. And the first districts that can be expected to have these planning documents out on the streets are districts 8, 6, and 5. So that's the update that I have prepared, and I thank you for your time and your attention.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner von Kneinenberg.
So remind me, have we programmed the $60 million to this yet?
No, not at this time.
Okay.
We're in the planning phase.
Okay, so when do you anticipate?
Summer 2020.
Summer 2020. Yeah. Okay. And why is District 10 and 9 opting out at this point?
So as I mentioned, the SHOP advanced mitigation projects that were programmed in the 2016, we had 13 of them statewide. And as we started with the new program, we talked to the districts about engaging in new planning. And District 9 felt as if their mitigation requirements were being covered by the SHOP 2016 project. I think similarly for District 10, in that they had the California Tiger Salamander Bank that went out for proposal and bid recently.
So are there geographical areas that are better suited for this program than others?
You know, when we completed the statewide advanced mitigation needs assessment, there's really a need distributed across the state. I think what we're finding in early communication with the districts is that they really understand what types of mitigations are difficult to come by or they have to do often. And so that is also guiding the dialogue as to what's needed where.
Okay, and finally, how closely are you working with the 1282 task force?
I'm peripherally involved. My management is working closely, and I have done different presentations and updates with the 1282 working group. I believe that advanced mitigation is one of the proposed recommendations that's likely to move forward.
Okay. What I would I'm kind of surprised that you're not intimately involved in that. I would think that would be an important tool to help, because those 9 resource agencies that are signed on to you are the ones we're trying to work with over there. And as we are going to go through several projects here after your presentation that are having issues with getting the resource agencies to make their comments early and stick with them, I would think kind of working holistically together might smooth that process. Am I wrong in that?
No, you're not. My counterpart, the other office chief for biological studies, is fully engaged, and she's in the office right next door, so we do collaborate, and she's aware of the program, and like I said, I think it's one of the recommendations moving forward, so I think it's definitely part of the dialogue.
Okay.
Yeah.
All righty, yes, Commissioner Dunn.
Thank you. I concur with Commissioner Van Konynenberg. I think there needs to be really intimate conversation here because we need to be very protective of the funding that is available and make sure that we're efficient with resource protection. So you might want to talk internally about being intimately involved in that. And my question for you is, can you talk a little bit about how do we reward good behavior for communities that already and districts that already have their own local mitigation? Are we leveraging those funds appropriately with what you're planning in the guidelines as well? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think the local programs that have gotten started are, in the stages ahead of us,
Yes.
And that they'll continue to do planning. We have established a working group that has all of the local transportation agencies that have programs to share and do lessons learned and have some dialogue. As we move into the more regional planning, I think there's going to be additional coordination. One of the changes in the draft guidelines to the final was putting that role and responsibility directly to the districts to do that outreach and make sure that there's coordination with the local transportation agencies early and ongoing through the process.
Okay. I'm really looking for really thoughtful guidance on making sure we reward districts that have this and that, again, using the efficiency, that leverage of programs that already exist, as you know, I think that would be really smart of the state to work off successes that are already there. So thank you.
Yeah.
And also encourage more, mitigation programs in other districts. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely. There's a couple of members of the group that are trying to get them instigated.
Great.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Well, just to add on to that, I think, yesterday we talked and we heard from Commissioner Kehoe multiple times about the challenges with the bluff in San Diego, and we'd just been up to the last chance grade. And so, we just said, welcome, Tokes. You've got some fun projects on both ends of the state. And I think those are going to be excellent opportunities, too, because we're going to need all the tools in the toolkit to get those accomplished. So, Tokes, I don't know if you had something to add here, but I think the commission really encourages integrated, and I think as we work with our MOU on the new waters of the state definition for transportation, that can be a part of that whole discussion too. So on your little short list of items to get to, we'd love to work with you on this to see how we can all get across the goal line as effectively and efficiently as possible. So with that, anything else to add? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So talking about a dashboard and moving it forward, let's go to item 74, please. Terry.
Good morning, Commissioners. Item 74 is an informational item. Alex Hergod is the Executive Director of the Federal Permitting Improvement Steering Council, and he's here to provide a report on the coordination of permitting across different federal agencies.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Chairman, my good friend Secretary Kim, who, when working for the Obama administration, worked with me at the U.S. Senate to help actually craft the legislation that I'll be talking about today. I don't know if it's Commissioner Tokes Omashakin. Did I say it right? Not a commissioner. Director, rather. Sorry. Pardon me. And the rest of the commissioners. Yeah. Did I get? All right. I had some help. My name is Alex Hergott. I was appointed by the President at the beginning of the administration to work at the Council on Environmental Quality as the Associate Director for Infrastructure, drafting Executive Order 1 Federal Decision. Shortly after that, and learning about what California was doing on 1282 in recognition of their forward thinking as one of the states that is taking early coordination, recognition of bringing all relevant stakeholders to the front end of the process, establishing roles and responsibility, and bringing common sense to a process that is typically a black box for no other reason than we have too many decision makers with too many statutory authorities, both at the federal and state level, trying to provide answers and authorizations for projects to move forward. And the recognition that you need a central coordinating element, an impartial referee within government that can be the one-stop shop. The task force has been geared up. I know Secretary Kim and Chair Inman, and I don't know if many others in the room are on the task force. And we have worked with you all to try and harmonize our efforts to ensure that what we are doing at the federal level meets what you're doing, so that we can, in fact, have a multiplier effect on ensuring we reduce times on these projects without any compromises of environmental outcomes. I have a short presentation I can give that explains the federal council. Is that geared up? So, the Federal Permitting Council was created in the FAST Act of 2015, a bill that I wrote while I was the staff director of the Environment and Public Works Committee, along with then Senator Boxer and my boss, Senator Inhofe, where two folks on both opposite sides of the aisle came together to pass the largest infrastructure bill in the history of our country, which included a statutory council, which includes myself, the executive director, and the chairman. The council members are made up of the deputy secretaries of all the relevant federal agencies, Army Corps of Engineers, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Department of Interior, and so forth. What we do is we provide a one-stop shop for projects of $200 million or more that can voluntarily apply to our council. And as long as they are $200 million in economic activity, not project cost, economic activity, which for all those that have applied for Tiger grants or infra grants know that with the right econometric analysis, you can get up to 200 million quite quickly while taking into account induced economic output and so forth. Executive level oversight, but the bottom line is it's common sense. It's not that complicated. It's a definitive beginning and a definitive end in the process. Decision makers within each agency, not just having yourself, Secretary Kim, or yourself, Chair Inman, but also having a secondary individual, which we call the Certified Environmental Review Project Officer, which actually is the working group, the person that we are on the phone with on a daily basis, adjudicating disputes and fixing communication breakdowns across agencies, and then dispute resolution. At some point, if there is a communication breakdown, I have the capability to make a decision when there is a dispute between two agencies and it is not subject to judicial review. It is the strongest endgame that exists in current law. How it works, and this is something where I would like to work with you all to ensure that we harmonize our efforts so that we don't have two separate dashboards, but we have a dashboard, and for those, you're not allowed to use your phones, but if you go to permits.performance.gov and click on projects, you can simply see something that an 8th grader can understand, which is a listing of projects, all the relevant authorizations, timelines, and milestone extension requests where you can't move those timelines unless you have a justified excuse. And you can't pause the project just because things get hard. You have to solve problems. And I frankly don't really care if people go on vacation. They just have to get their work done before they do. Because what we owe our taxpayers is a process that is transparent and clear. Because we're not forcing yeses, we're just forcing decisions. Within 14 days of someone applying for a project, we have to make a decision if someone meets the definition of a covered project. $200 million of economic activity requires NEPA, or an environmental review, which would, in California, would trigger both environmental reviews, and deals with one or more federal agencies. After that, this is where the rubber meets the road, and where it's 90% of what we do is we fly out to the state like we do up on Plains Pipeline in Santa Barbara, what I'm going to be doing on a couple reservoirs up in Shasta, and what I'll be doing on some fire management EISs in Northern California, which is we fly out and we put together within 60 days of being added on that dashboard a coordinated project plan where we bring all the relevant stakeholders into a room, many of which have only met each other over email, and we actually craft out a realistic plan in real time that is defensible and understandable and real, reducing litigation risk, bringing all relevant people to the table so that we don't find out 6 months after a record of decision that in fact the Surfrider Association down in Coronado has an issue that they could have brought to the front end of the process but didn't even know an EIS was moving through the process. We're not trying to move quicker than what is required. What we're trying to do is bring all relevant people to the front end to make a decision. We put out a best practices report every year, which I'm not going to go into because, and you have to apologize. It's not AB 1227. I think my staff. I think that's a human trafficking bill. I'll be talking to them when I get back. I think that was. I'm speaking at the National Conference of State Legislators in Phoenix, where I'll be speaking to many California members. Where I'll be talking about this and giving you all much credit, and then also be speaking to the National Governors Association in January, where this will also be the hallmark of what I talk about, because only you and Arizona have similar situated permitting task forces that are actually cutting through bureaucratic red tape and giving people the answers that they require. Many of what you have is also included in our permitting timetable, but there's a couple things I just wanted to bring out. The permitting task force is very much, in your case, a project-by-project task force, and it really only looks at projects after 30% design. There are opportunities for us to work together to take some of our best practices to actually provide additional resources, which we can move to California. We would also be happy to bring a detailee from Caltrans or Mr. Kim's office to Washington, D.C. to work in our independent council. I report to the Office of Management and Budget and the President. My job is to be an impartial, apolitical, reliable federal partner that can shepherd you through the process. And that's what these permitting councils have to be to inoculate from litigation risk. The other thing that I would just point in is states under federal statute have the ability to opt in on a project-by-project basis, which we're working on. We'll be happy to work on with you on some of these bigger projects. Once you opt in, you take the place almost as a federal agency, and all of the state-required authorizations are on the dashboard alongside all the federal ones. We have no authorization authority over the delegated authorities of states or your own organic statutes. However, we're putting them all on the dashboard for the public to see so that we understand that our timelines are synced up. Just so you know, and I'm sure you're going to have the same results, saving over $1 billion in project costs, but what it really has done, if you talk to Mr. Washington at LA Metro or Joshua Shank or the others, is that our ability to reduce and your ability to reduce predictability risk is inducing private sector investment into public infrastructure like we've never seen before, because there's a definitive beginning and a definitive end. And the commissioners, you may all not necessarily get credit for that, because it's very opaque and it's hard to put a press release out about money you otherwise would have saved for not having another 6 months in a process, or the fact that you reduce the cost of debt and equity by 6% because the actuaries and the systems guys on Wall Street are now giving you better ratings on your projects because they know that the litigation and regulatory risk is substantially reduced because there's adults in the room fixing problems as they happen. As you know, and this is just the criteria, and I'll just stop there. These are the sectors that we cover. We have $400 billion in projects on our dashboard, which makes us the largest ombudsman in the entire world. You may not hear about us much because we're very much below the tweets. If we're doing our job right, you'll never hear about us. I will end there, and then I welcome any questions. And once again, it's a privilege to come here and speak to the commission this morning.
Okay, questions for Alex?
I was told I had 5 minutes,
Yes,
so I packed
Secretary
it in.
Kim.
Alex, it's great to see you.
Yes,
We
Secretary.
usually see each other in D.C., so it's great to have you here in Southern California. Welcome. You might be aware that yesterday was the 4th anniversary of the signing of the FAST Act. So congratulations, since you were so instrumental in passing that
I have
bill.
PTSD from sleeping in my office for 6 months, so
Right, so 4 years in one day.
Yeah.
Maybe another birthday to come. Hopefully not much more than that.
Yeah.
We'll see. A couple quick questions. Can you clarify our understanding on statute of limitations? Because as you know, under NEPA, the current statute of limitations for surface transportation projects is 150 days. Under the FAST 41 dashboard, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's 2 years.
Sure.
For projects that participate in your program, which statute would apply?
So, Secretary, and just for the benefit of the commission, much like we do in Washington, D.C. sometimes, and why we have the council, is we have different committees within the House and the Senate that produce their own permitting initiatives, and they overlap. It's what we did with the Clean Water Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Endangered Species Act. That's why we have 14 federal agencies with 29 statutes and 250 pieces of guidance that a project sponsor is supposed to understand and walk through. The whole project, the whole point is not to have to go to DC and hire 6 consultants to figure out how you get an answer, right? That's wasted capital. And what we did in MAP 21 in 2012 under 139 of Title 23 was created a permitting apparatus for just federal highways projects. And the problem with that is it's very agency specific. And what the council does that is a step beyond what we created in 2012 is it takes in all federal agencies in which it's not just federal highways on this process that's looking at just the NEPA process. What we're also concerned about is the 52 other permits post a record of decision that could be required. Army Corps 404 permit, a 106 review with our partners in tribal government, perhaps a BLM right-of-way. Those things are not necessarily encapsulated in the 139 review. And so when you get to the judicial part, yes, there's a 180 statute of limitations, which means you can't sue once after 180 days have transpired. Fast 41, it is 2 years, but I will tell you this. 8 years ago, we didn't have iPhones. 4 years ago, when a major environmental impact statement was being issued, you had to parse through 10,000 pages of the Federal Register to try and figure out where an EIS was moving. Now, everything is on the internet. We are not seeing a situation in which lawsuits we don't see 6 months before the record of decision, because now we're bringing relevant individuals to the front of the room. What I will tell you is the statute of limitations protection, confession is good for the soul, seemed like a good idea when I was a staffer. In practice, not a single project has been sued that has been on the dashboard because the transparency is providing a comfort and a level of engagement to all stakeholders, those that oppose the project, those that are for it, those that have no real bias except NIMBYism. Because they're part of the project, it's harder for judges, especially in the Ninth Circuit, to use the rhetorical tools to object to a project because we did our jobs. And as a matter of process, it's exactly what we always should have been doing. And in a world with the internet, where you could pull up an EIS and search right to a particular project, public engagement is at an all-time high, and transparency is flourishing. So I don't like to even talk about judicial limitation sections. That's why I skipped over it, because for my world, it's becoming somewhat irrelevant. Because people aren't waiting 150 days to sue a project, they're suing it within 30 days, right? So those become more of an illusory benefit that I used to put in a press release that now, as a practitioner, make no sense.
Yes, Commissioner Von Kneinenberg.
So you talked about how the different agencies, you agree to the dashboard.
Yep.
And the timeline.
Yep.
And everyone sticks to it.
Yep.
How do you prevent an agency from saying, well, we're independent, we're just not going to stick to the timeline?
So that is why you don't just have.
Where's the carrot and where's the
So
stick?
and this is why we call it a coordinated project plan. If you just had a lead agency under Section 139 of Title 23, which currently exists, the language in that law, I know because I wrote it, says, to the maximum extent practicable, agencies shall coordinate.
Sounds good.
It's very permissive, and there's no real, so in recognition that the best laid laws don't actually change the culture and behavior within agencies to realign everyone's definition of success, which is actually getting the project built. That's why we call them coordinated project plans. Everyone comes to the table and puts their date down. As soon as that date is put down and it's on the dashboard, you would be surprised about the transparency and the way in which that deadline provides a shame factor in which you do not miss that deadline, or else you turn to red. And now you're the reason why the project is delayed, because you didn't work with EPA on your 401 analysis, or you didn't get your 402 discharge permit. On the federal dashboard, there is some flexibility. 30 days out, if you really think you're going to have a significant problem, there's been a storm, or if the project sponsor has backed off and is looking at a different alignment, you can request a milestone extension. We put that through a review where we look at it. We talk to, in this case, it'd be Federal Highways or Caltrans, or I would talk to one of the MPOs, and we would try and get to the base of the matter. Then we would third party validate with the project sponsor and say, is this what you're hearing? And if that's the case, then we move the date. So the idea is not just to have the lead agency dropping a permitting timetable that we all know is not realistic. That's why we focus on the coordinated project plan, because we're trying to work within respective agencies. And I will just give you one example. When working with federal agencies, one of the most important things that I've learned is that the Bureau of Land Management, U.S. Forest Service, Federal Highways, Army Corps of Engineers, NOAA, they have no real recognition of each other's statutory authorities. They do their job in a silo without necessarily recognizing that there could be a tremendous amount of synergy by co-locating and harnessing their unique resources to work together as a government family to actually try and produce results. So that's been the biggest. So the idea is not that there is a hammer. I put an annual report to Congress out every year, which grades agencies, and then and if there's more than 150% delay in a project, meaning if it was supposed to be 2 years and now it's reaching 3 years, I have to now notify Congress and do so in testimony on a near quarterly basis. So it's really about just bringing transparency to the table, and there's not really a hammer, so to speak.
Other question? Yes, Commissioner Dunn.
Yeah, following on Secretary Kim's comment, then if practically speaking, they're suing within 30 days, why don't you align the statute of limitations? So that why make it 2 years? That's crazy making.
Well, because for me, I don't just deal with highway projects. I deal with extremely complicated pipeline projects and transmission lines and projects that are about $15 billion in size. And so you want to allow an appropriate amount of time for a case and for analysis to be built on whether or not the review was done properly. But I will tell you this. The administrative record for many of these projects in the past was not done in real time and had to be recreated after the fact. Now, all of the information is in a central repository online where you don't have to mine it within the respective agencies. It's all in a single place. So it doesn't take 6 months to try and figure out whether or not there was a process foul somewhere along the line, because you would have known it well before. But I just want to go back and I don't focus on the limitation aspects of it, because I sometimes think it ends up becoming a red herring. That we focus on whether or not at the front and the back end, whether or not a project can be sued within 30 days, 180 days, or 2 years. If we do our job right on the front end, pre-notice of intent, and have every stakeholder adequately engaged, the idea that we'd be talking about litigation well before we're even at that point.
Yeah, no, I get all that. It's just, why not align it? So why don't you make...
I don't think I'm going to be able to get 60 votes in the Senate to change this law.
That's great. Thanks, Alex. The commission has just recently done a town hall up in Crescent City where we have our last chance grade that's basically Highway 1 is falling into the ocean. The easement that we're on has gone away, so we're technically not where we're supposed to be currently. Port Oaks thinks we're trying to ship them off to the border of California. But I think just being there, that project probably is one that should end up with us recruiting you to work with us, because we have national parks, we've got our Yurok Nation there, our Native Americans, and I think that would probably be a wonderful opportunity. We have $50 million currently that we're working on trying to figure out where alternatives might be. So I would hope that since there's no fee to apply for your help, that might be one where we would recruit Alex and his team, because I think it's fantastic that the guy that helped craft all the language is now living with it, because it's good. So
I echo that, and then it wasn't without some of the work that Secretary Kim also contributed at the administration. At some point, we needed technical help from Federal Highways and DOT. I haven't cornered the market on all the good ideas, but I will tell you this. Executive Order 13807, one federal decision which passed August 2017, that says that any state or any project sponsor or anyone that basically needs the federal family to speak with one concerted voice in order to provide predictability can call me or my team at any time, and we can help shepherd a project through the process. It is not, so I look forward, any project that you have, any collaborative work that we want to do, especially as we get other states to adopt what you have done here, is going to be something that we're going to be extremely motivated for. Keep in mind, we're funded at $6.1 million by Congress, which makes us 2.5 times the size of the Council on Environmental Quality. We have a tremendous amount of resources to help and provide technical assistance to make sure that we get our federal folks that oftentimes are resource limited. Not that they don't necessarily want to approve the project, that they have 30 other things going on. Mm-hmm. We focus and prioritize resources and ensure we get the backs of those GS-12 biologists that have to sign their name on the dotted line. We're very realistic from a practitioner standpoint, and we look forward to working with you to make sure that we get the federal government out of your way when it comes to you building and maintaining modernizing projects. So
perfect. Okay, great. Well, great to see you, and thank you so much.
Am I allowed to go up and shake his hand?
Oh, of course.
All right.
You can give him a hug.
All right, I have to hop on a plane. Is that all right?
Okay, perfect. We have your phone number. We know where to find you. Okay, item 75, please. Terry?
Commissioners, item 75 is an informational item. The Transportation Permitting Task Force was formed as a result of Assembly Bill 1282 of 2017. Over the past 2 years, the task force has brought together transportation and resource agencies to collaboratively address statewide transportation permitting challenges. The legislation requires the Secretary of Transportation to prepare and submit a report of findings to the legislature. Phil Stolarski is here to provide you on an update of that report.
Good morning. Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Executive Director Susan Branson, Secretary Kim, and Director Tokes. I'm here today to give a brief presentation on 1282 and the update to 1282, the task force. So what is 1282? It was a law that was passed in 2017, actually was recommended through the CTC back in 2016, and it develops a multi-agency task force and to develop the following items: to develop a structured, coordinated process for early engagement in all parties in the development of transportation projects to reduce permitting processing time, establish reasonable deadlines for permit approvals, and provide a greater certainty of permit approval requirements. So as we were developing the criterion framework, we're actually part of the legislation called out for where are a permitting analysis, where in a sense are those pinch points for the permits. And so we did several Kaizen efforts, and also we went out and interviewed staff on different types of projects. We looked at routine type projects, for example, culverts. There's a project in Placer County on I-80 with culverts. And we looked at more complex projects. Complex projects would be, in a sense, where you may be crossing water. You may have affect some coastal resources, as opposed to culverts where maybe you don't have an endangered species issue to deal with. And so one of the projects that we actually interviewed was at Dr. Feinbridge and looked at what are some of the issues that you're experiencing in the project. And from that, we got various areas of delays and understanding the permit requirements across the agencies, something Alex mentioned about working in silos. What does that mean? Also, ineffective early coordination. Alex brought that out loud and clear. It's very important. It's part of why this legislation talked about that structured early coordination process. And also better coordination of design considerations with the environmental outcomes required. And as we were working through AB 1282, was a very important task to accomplish, because our regulatory agencies are very interested in reaching those environmental outcomes. And so as we were working with the team, how do we marry, in a sense, the different missions within these regulatory agencies, where Caltrans is a safe, integrated, sustainable transportation system, right, to benefit Californians, where CDFW is about habitat and protecting the habitat. And so we really came to agreement that a transportation project could improve the environment, get those environmental outcomes that you want, and that's what led to some of the recommendations that are forthcoming. So, members of the task force was led by CalSTA. Bruce April was the representative from Caltrans that represented CalSTA. He's our District 11 Deputy of Environmental. We also had Cal Natural Resources. We also included Cal EPA, because that's very important, because they have the state water control boards and the 9 regional water boards. Also, the CTC, Fran Inman, was on our task force. Caltrans, of course, Director Tokes now is on the task force. Fish and Wildlife, Water Resources Board. We had 3 regional water quality boards on the task force, Region 1, 2, and 5. Also, the California Coastal Commission, the California High-Speed Rail Authority, San Mateo Transportation Authority, LA Metro, and the Rural Counties Task Force. And so why AB 1282? I mean, it's apparent that with SB 1, the investment in transportation is going to be important, more important than ever. And how do we develop those efficiencies to get those dollars to go further? How do we ensure that the investment that we're making into our liaison interagency agreements is going to benefit those projects? And also an opportunity for all local levels. I mean, whatever comes out of our 1282 effort is not going to inform and implement into state projects, but also projects on the local agency side is going to be very important. And also, once again, it's an investment in transportation, but yet we're also going to get and reach those environmental outcomes that are important to our regulatory partners. And once again, it's about expediting the transportation projects while protecting the natural resources. Early engagement in ensuring where are those impacts going to be with delays. I think it's important too that as we're developing our draft final report, is that the outcomes are to improve and create efficiencies with the different amount of rework. And also, what is going to be our return on investment measurement strategies that we need and are being developed? And also metrics for evaluating those performance of Caltrans staff liaisons to develop those time and savings costs as we provide liaisons as we provide support to regulatory agencies to be our permanent liaisons. And so, some of the things that we came up with and we found, not just come up with, but really doing a deep dive into where are the impacts for permitting, came up with rework on limiting design changes after permit application that will reduce need for later redesign and reapplication. That's an important part. That's one of our recommendations. One of our recommendations for innovative solutions is accelerated bridge construction. For example, a fish passage project. If we can remediate a fish passage project with what I call the bridge in the box, if it's going to be the same length, the skew, it's not going to change. Our regulatory agencies are going to be in agreement, maybe potentially for programmatic agreements where we don't have to re-permit it all the time if nothing's going to change. Accurate permit applications. We did a Lean Six Sigma prior to 1282 on the 1600 stream bed permit. And the goal of that was to have a 95% acceptance of the application, not the permit, but the application for the first time. Prior to initiating the Lean Six Sigma, our track rate was 49% of the time, first time the application got approved. And so we formed a team with CDFW and Caltrans, it was led by Caltrans, and from that, we developed several implemented solutions, and one of them was a checklist. And that simple checklist improved our acceptance rate for the application the first time up to 90%. We're not yet to 95, but we're going to get there. But that's a simple solution that we could enact maybe potentially with our other agencies. Mm-hmm. Amy Bailey talked about mitigation, advanced mitigation, and she's being humble. She was very much involved in AB 1282 and her staff. It's a revolutionary idea, very forward thinking of if we can create what the permit requirements are ahead of time, that's going to be a real game changer for saving of time and cost. And we looked about pre-agreed avoidance and mitigation strategies, so we don't have to, not reach what those mitigation costs are going to be. Maybe at the end, the regulatory agency says, oh, by the way, we want a different ratio than what we agreed to. So that's going to be very important. Also, return on investments. If we can shift our focus and the early coordination of a project, and I'll get this into a little bit later, potentially we don't need those resources later on in the process. And we need to develop what are those return on investments. And potentially some examples for metrics for success would be complete applications first pass, like we did with the 1600, percent mitigation plans agreed upon before the application is submitted. We've talked about that and how do we develop that metric and measure that. And then percent reduction in permitting process time. And then also the percent of permits that are issued under the current state regulatory times with the California permitting, the California Streamlined Permitting Act of 1977. So there's more work to be done because we just don't want to ask for resources without developing metrics to determine whether the resources that we need. Mm-hmm. So part of this early structure coordinating process is going to be important to look at our current project delivery process. And so after over 100 workshops, numerous interviews with staff, both on within Caltrans with our regulatory agencies, looking at this diagram, the ongoing coordination usually begins during the PS&E. How can we get that earlier in the process? So once we get to that, we know, defined what that footprint's going to be, so we know what the mitigation costs are going to be, we know what the permit requirements are going to be. So early mitigation approaches, early coordination, KN0 phase, that came up numerous times as to a potential solution for a delay. Once again, the early collaboration with the permitting agencies, that's goes without saying is important. And also, Alex, as he pointed out, dispute avoidance and resolution protocols. I'm going to get to this a little bit later, but it's important that it doesn't stop at a staff level person, that there is some process in place that moves it up for a determination of, why are you making that determination? Why potentially are you changing the mitigation ratios? How do we get, I thought we had this agreement. That's going to be really important. And so, I think it's important that in order to be this effective, is that in order to have effective execution, we really need to have measurable deliverables. And that's going to be important, because right now, this report and the effort has really been from a headquarters perspective, but now we need to involve our regions, both for the Water Board, for CDFW, for Coastal, and for Caltrans, is how are we going to execute these recommendations. And it's going to be important that, we define those early project objectives and we actually flange them up with those description of alternatives. It's also that if there's any type of design or construction issues that come up, we need to get those early on. If it's going to be an impact to a resource, we need to define those. Oops, what did I do? Oh, help. I think I hit the wrong button. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm not going to go, we began, when we first started the process, we had over 125 recommendations, and we boiled it down to 35. We still need to prioritize what are those, top 3, top 10, top 5, what are those priorities. But here's some ones. Advanced mitigation is, once again, if we can establish programmatic solutions for planned advanced mitigation efforts, that's going to decrease the time it is to negotiate over what that mitigation is going to be. We'll have that in advance. Also, we need to update some things we need to do. We need to update the mitigation bank policies and practices to accommodate advanced mitigation purchase. Amy's staff is working on that. We also talked about how can we establish a crediting framework for some of the items that we're very much interested in at Caltrans, CDFW, fish passage, wildlife connectivity. Can we get credits, in-kind credits for those type of projects is one of those. Develop and implement programmatic approaches for permitting processing. I think, that's what we did with, we have many projects that have culverts on them. If we can bunch or put these culverts together, if they're routine, if they're repetitive, they may pose the most bang for our buck to get, and minimal risk, to get a programming agreement with our regulatory agency, so we don't have to get permits again and again, or if you have 50 culverts, can we get a programming agreement for 40 of them instead of going back and forth one-on-one? Develop a consistent and detailed permitting processing tools and guidance. Once again, in the early planning phases, would be a great tool. A tool that was developed, a simple tool, was a checklist for our Lean Six Sigma. Develop, I'm not going to go through all these, improve communication strategies and resolve conflicts. Goes back to that dispute resolution. How do we push things up the chain? So we try to resolve at the lowest level, but if we're at a point in time where we can't resolve it, how do we move that up the chain? I talked about develop incentives for innovative design solutions. Can we have a compendium of, environmental friendly designs, one of them being fish passage, bridge remediation. And then finally, in order for this to be successful, we really need to have a structure for change management. And that's going to be important to form a change management team. What is a task force going to look like? How are we going to engage the three secretaries and their directors, define success and measurement. What is that? Once again, as I said, we need to measure effective execution against defined objectives. And we need to define those objectives, and then more importantly, we need to develop a scorecard. Alex talked about a dashboard. We actually talked about a dashboard. And how are we doing? Are we meeting those requirements of those defined measures? We currently have a tri-agency agreement, but I think we need a more granular one. I often told my staff and I told the regulatory agencies, we need to treat this as Caltrans does a contract for delivery and measure those issues or items that need to be measured for success for delivery of a project. And then we need to have some kind of a formal check-in with leadership as how we're doing to keep us accountable. We need accountability because we're making this investment into the infrastructure, we're making this investment into the environment. We want to make sure that we're hitting the right targets. And I think that was, any questions?
Okay, do we have questions? Susan. Director Branson.
Bill, thank you for your presentation. I had a question for you. So the bill was passed quite a while ago, and I'm just wondering, when was the report due? What actions are currently happening? It sounded in your presentation like there's a lot left to explore, and my question is, how do we get to action? How can we get this happening, the improvements happening today?
So
And
currently,
when is the report due?
yeah. So currently, the legislation says that the report is due on or before December 1st to the legislature. We are currently working with our partners to finalize the report, and the report is currently under final review.
Okay, and so as far as return on investment and costs to implement the actions that you're planning to include in the report, will that all be detailed in the report? And, just the performance metrics, the costs, the return on investment you're expecting to achieve, and the specific projects that you're going
Yes.
to start moving?
Yeah, so that as the report's under further review, we need to, per what the report is, this draft report is saying, to address those, we need to develop those performance metrics, and we need to develop those return on investment strategies.
Well, I do think in the meantime, I'm totally appreciative of the fact that just on the application, we have moved the needle tremendously already. So while the report is getting polished and finalized, I do think that we are already seeing some advantages, and I'm confident that we're building that into our culture so we don't regress to having 43% or 49%, whatever the number was, of our applications, not even giving our agency. And then I also want to just give a shout out to Secretary Wade Crowfoot, because I think very much like Alex talked about being there when the laws were written and now he's living with it. We have the same with Wade. Wade was in the horseshoe with SB1 and feels very, very passionate about delivering to the people of California on the promises there. And I think just the energy and the passion that Wade has brought to his leadership role there is beneficial for all of us, because he is very much committed to our mutual success, I think, so.
So Chairman Inman, if I could just.
Sure.
So CFW has their yearly leadership meeting with their regional managers, our exec staff, on March 4th and 5th. So I've been working with Chuck Bonham's staff, and the morning of the 4th, is going to be a time for Caltrans execs and CDFW execs to get together and talk about these very things that we need to do to keep the momentum moving.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Commissioner von Kronenberg.
Thank you, Phil, for your presentation, and thank you, Chair Inman, for participating in this task force. But I have to confess I'm a bit impatient, because we're going to go through several items whereby we're going to have supplementals because someone said, well, I don't want to make a comment until you're 40% done on design. And then when we did 40% design, they said, well, you know what, we don't like design, start all over again. Or, we have these situations, again, where we could be saving significant funds by having a process in place that forces everybody to get involved at the front end and commit to when they're going to make decisions, so we don't miss construction seasons. And Matt Brady's hair is turning gray as we speak on all the issues that he has to deal with, that could really benefit from us pushing ahead on this and really bringing some, hopefully, a process that everyone buys into, that gets the job done, but has the urgency that we have in the construction world of getting projects done on a timely manner, because time burns up money. And so I'm hopeful that the efficiencies report that Caltrans presents 2 years from now says we saved a significant amount of money because the permitting went so smoothly that we can claim $100 million in savings through this process. So I appreciate everything you're doing. I appreciate, that's my hand of affirmation. But I have to confess my impatience.
So if I can just make a comment on that, I agree with you. I'm also an impatient person. So I told my staff and project delivery staff that I'll be working with Mike Keever and Janice Benton and Designs that we can't wait till the report to come out. What can we do now in our Caltrans process to take what we've learned from these interviews, the permitting analysis, the Kaizen, to bring those to specific projects? And I know we can do that. What can we do earlier in the process? So we're going to be meeting to do that. And there's things that we've learned about the top delays that can be applied to a Dr. Fine bridge and get the outcomes that we want. And I'd love to come back and present the $100 million savings in 2 years.
I look forward to that.
I think I just committed myself.
We'll count it all joy, and I am delighted. I have never been honored for my patience, so it's a new day. It's my day. I know. I got to get going then. Thank you very much. I appreciate the commitment. And a note from Alex, the no vacation delay. Let's make that of one of our mantras too, because we hear over and over again that, Bobby was going to check my work, but he's going on vacation for 2 weeks. So I think we have that no vacation delay memo as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Now we're going to go back to item 36 from yesterday.
Commissioners, item 36 is an information item. This is the fiscal year 18-19 fourth quarter intercity passenger rail operations report. And Kyle Gradinger, Assistant Division Chief for the Division of Rail and Mass Transportation, is here to provide you a brief summary and to answer any questions you may have.
All right. Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Before I get into the report, I just want to step back to an item yesterday that in our rush to get out to the cocktail hour, we skipped over, but I wanted to highlight one of the items that the Commission allocated yesterday, I want to thank you for, was for a hydrogen fuel cell train for the Redlands Rail project. And I just wanted to make the point to thank you all very much for this allocation. It's an incredibly innovative project. This will be the first hydrogen fuel cell rail vehicle in North America. And eyes are on us across the state and across the continent. And I'm really, really excited about the opportunity that allocation will create. So thank you very much for that. So just a very brief update on the FY 18-19 rail ridership report. The year was a fairly steady year. There was a slight decline in intercity passenger rail ridership. However, revenue was up. At the same time, operating costs were also up significantly. So it was, I would frame it as a rebuilding year for some of the corridors. They continue to grow, and the JPAs have been experimenting and trying new service offerings, and they've had the last year to really see how those have played out and to make tweaks and improve those services. For example, the Surfliner created a new morning peak hour service on the north end of the corridor in April of 2018, and that had some knock-on effects that they were shaking out through the year with late trains and delays, but they have worked through those, and then just recently we were able to create new capacity through a grade crossing completion at Rosecrans Marquardt, we were able to extend a triple track section of track through there, and that enabled the Surfliner to operate an additional 13th round trip a day, and that 13th round trip is now filling in the slot that was shifted to the north end in April 2018, and we're seeing great early ridership results from that improvement. And on the same tone, the San Joaquin corridor also had an effort in the last year to initiate a morning express service to Sacramento. I think the timing was a little too early for that market. We've shifted back and to a new and improved schedule that extends the service across the entire corridor, and that change took place in May of this year, which was not really reflected in the fiscal year 18-19 ridership report, but the past 4 or 5 months have been very solid with that new service. The ridership is increasing again on that part of the corridor. So those are just a few of the brief highlights from the 18-19 intercity rail passenger ridership report. So I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Yes, Commissioner Kehoe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. Thank you. We talked about this last night at the reception, but I can't let any item on rails go by without mentioning the critical situation down in Del Mar. Secretary Kim committed yesterday to forming a task force and looking at emergency repairs, I think, as soon as possible. Eventually, speeding up the phasing for the bluff stabilization, hopefully not eventually, but as soon as possible, and then also moving the right-of-way, and there's a lot of details to be worked out, but I don't know exactly how you would participate in that, and if you can tell us more about it, please
Sure.
do.
Yes, I would be happy to support the efforts of the task force. I can reiterate the importance of that corridor. I believe today there are 44 trains a day, both between coaster and surfliner, heading through that corridor. In addition,
those are just passenger
those are
trains,
just
right?
passenger,
Right.
and BNSF provides freight service in that corridor. It is a STRACnet corridor, which is the National Strategic Defense Rail Network, and so there's a lot of very important freight goods that need to be delivered to and from the Navy in San Diego and other customers on BNSF's line.
Right.
The plans for Surfliner, Coaster, and in the state rail plan envision significant growth on the passenger side. I think we're going from, like I said, the 44 trains a day now to 78 trains a day, doubling the frequency by 2030. So this is all in the middle of a corridor, which is the second busiest passenger rail corridor in the country outside of the Northeast Corridor. This is a vital link, not only for California, but nationally, and we'll do what we can to support shoring that up, literally.
Good, I'm glad to hear you describe it like that, and I think it's also good to remember that, if we're talking, public's confidence in the safety of the line is paramount for all those passengers that go back and forth on that line. And I think the economic implications for San Diego and all of California are clear. One of the recent newspaper articles said that 10% of all the cars coming into the U.S. go up that line from San Diego to other parts of the country. So just as soon as we can get it going. My understanding also is that Sandag will be trying to execute some emergency funds to get going on the immediate stabilization efforts, and also pulling in our congressional delegation for federal funds. So I think we should all be working on that.
Thank you. We will support that effort.
And thanks for your presentations. They're always good. Thank
Yes.
you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner von Konynenberg.
Thank you, Kyle, for your report. One thing I'd like to, and it doesn't have to be in your quarterly reports, but maybe in your annual reports, is you do some great charts as to tracking ridership. One of the things that in a totally different industry, we do a percentage of capacity. So how many seats are available on the train and how many seats are full? Because if you have a minor change and you're still running at 98% of the seats are full, you're probably at the capacity of the, and that's probably good for us to know to see what growth is on all these different lines. So if that can be added to future reports, that would be super helpful.
Sure.
Second question. So yesterday in the STIP, there were 3 projects that came up, and I'm very familiar with the Stockton Diamond project. Tell me about the new maintenance facility expansion at ACE, because that's not something I've heard of before. Give me a little bit of where that's at in the planning process?
Sure. So the maintenance facility expansion at the Stockton ACE facility is actually going to be to accommodate the new single-level rail car fleet that we're acquiring right now from the Siemens factory in Sacramento. We'll receive 49 new rail cars beginning in early next year, and they'll go into service within about the next 18 months. And that fleet will be operating primarily on the San Joaquin corridor, and due to space constraints and other issues at the Oakland maintenance facility, we really identified Stockton as the ideal location for maintaining those vehicles. And I think what's also interesting is rail cars are actually very technologically innovative these days, and so the maintenance cycles, the maintenance jobs that are going to come with that are actually high-tech jobs now. So not only is it a strategic location for being able to maintain those vehicles in the right location, it's also a great, I think, high-road job opportunity for the Stockton area as well.
And then on the coastline, the positive train control, obviously that's a federal guideline that we add positive train control. Why wasn't that a money why didn't the agency come for allocation or apply for allocation on that through the TIRSIP earlier?
I'll have to get back to you with more information on that. I know that there are certain corridors around the country. There were a handful of corridors that were exempted from the regulation due to the frequency of passenger trains that were operating on them when the PTC law was passed in RISA in 2008. And I think it might be tied to the fact that we're seeking to grow passenger service on a corridor that did not have the requirement before. So it might be something to do with that, but I will get back to you on that as well.
Thank you.
San Joaquin did have it, didn't they?
Yes, the current corridors, all services in California today are now running with PTC per the federal deadline.
I think
Yes.
in most of California, it's all been installed.
Yes. There's a few
Get over
stretches
to
where
New
the long
Mexico is the
distance,
problem,
a few stretches where the long distance Amtrak trains run once a day. Those are what a lot of the exemptions across the country came from, and there's a few of those that we have in California. And in this particular area, that's one of the areas where there's one long distance train a day overlaps. And so when we shift capital corridor service or grow new service on the coast, we'll increase the frequency and sort of the exemption will no longer be valid.
They will be operative.
Correct. And if I could address your comment about the capacity, that is something that we are very interested academically at Caltrans. We try to analyze that, and I think it's a very good statistic to have. One of the difficulties with those that there's a lot of variables that go into that percent of capacity that can change in a given moment. The number of seats on a train. We can add a car at a very low marginal cost on a morning of a train. And so all of a sudden it's very difficult to say how many seats were full that day. We can change frequencies. And most importantly, we don't own the infrastructure. We don't own the capacity, but we do work really closely with BNSF, UP, and others. And as we do planning, that's why I say it's academic, as we plan for growth, we do look at factors such as what is the capacity of this corridor? Can we solve a capacity problem with additional cars, or do we need to do a track infrastructure capacity project as well? And there are other statistics that I should mention. The Secretary in 2014 created the Uniform Performance Standards. This is around the time that the new JPAs were created, and I think that these statistics capture a lot of the things that you're interested in. They're focused on usage, cost efficiency, and service quality. So usage looks at passengers and passenger miles, which gets to a lot of the capacity issues that I think you're interested in. Cost efficiency looks at operating cost per passenger mile and fare box recovery. And service quality looks at on-time performance, both at the end of the line and at every station along the line. And so I think these are statistics that we collect. They vary a lot from quarter to quarter. So we track the last 8 quarters in each of the reports, and then we also track to a baseline of 2014. When the JPAs were created. So we can measure over time as population along a corridor grows, how is the performance and the ridership going, and hopefully we're continuing to make progress every year, and we'll be happy to share that report with you.
Director Tokes, do you want to weigh in?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a very quick question, Kyle. Good job on the presentation, and thanks for all the work you're doing within the department. So you mentioned a downtick in ridership, and I think you said in 17, 18, I believe is what you said. What do you attribute that to, and what can we be thinking of moving forward to see that those numbers start to go in a different direction?
Great question. That was 1819. I believe the ridership was a 2.4% decrease, although revenue did increase at the same time. It's almost like an annual fluctuation. We've had a good trend over the last 4 or 5 years of ridership increases, but in the last year, a few of the things that I mentioned were the service changes and the risks and opportunities the JPAs are doing to try to bring in new service have created some unforeseen effects. So there were some scheduling issues when they introduced a new train. They didn't realize that it would cause another train to be late, which drove down on-time performance, and so that created a little bit of a ridership decline in one corridor. So it's just sort of growing pains, teething issues in a way, but I think that actually the trend is in many of the corridors in the last 5 months since the end of FY19, ridership is continuing to go up again across the board, and I think that we actually have standee conditions on several trains in both the Capital Corridor and Surfliner Corridor, so the demand is clearly still there, and we're matching the service to that demand.
But, it looks to me like there's a very strong correlation between the decline in ridership and the on-time performance. So the Capital Corridor, where there's standing room only, has the highest on-time performance, but realistically, to the fact that San Joaquin is in the 35%, is 65% on time, so there's more than a third of the chance you're going to be late. I don't think till we get that performance standard, we can spend all the money in the world, but if we don't deliver to the folks to meet their needs of where they need to go when they need to get there, it's not going to matter. So I think the slight decrease is bigger than a hiccup, because we should have been increasing ridership given the fact that we have made so many investments where our justification is we're going to increase ridership. So the delta to me is a little bigger, but I see the correlation of, if we can't deliver that value, we're not going to get people to join us.
Yeah, and we think there's a secret ingredient, I think, on the Capital Corridor to get that high ridership. There's been a really good collaboration with the host railroad, Union Pacific, for the last 20 years, where we do provide them with additional funding to maintain that corridor in a state of good repair every morning. The UP is directly incentivized, not by Amtrak, but through California taxpayer dollars, to make sure that those trains are out there on time every day. And we're working with Surfliner and San Joaquin's right now to develop similar agreements. In fact, I believe, made an allocation at the last meeting to Losan to create a similar on-time incentive agreement with Coaster in the southern end of the corridor, so that as those trains are delivered on time, as the OTP continues to go up, Coaster will receive a little bit of recognition for that work. So we're hopeful that secret ingredient will extend throughout the state, and we're making some good progress on agreements there.
Okay. Commissioner Norton.
Thank you very much, and I apologize for being late, Commissions. But I wanted to first say how excited I am to see the hydrogen train.
It is as well, absolutely.
Very exciting. I wanted to talk about yesterday's presentation and today's presentation about the freight plan, and then your presentation about rail. And it seems to me as though there is a connection, because a lot of the rail corridors are going along a lot of our freight corridors on the highways. And can it be said, as you're looking at ways to create capacity, that actually adding ridership on rail is really a freight strategy as well? Because we're getting more cars off the freeways that are impeding a freight, speed. And yet the impetus to create more opportunities for more people to take rail really needs to be there, because everyone that we get on a train, we're getting out of a car. And so I'm just wondering how we can start categorizing that even in the freight plan, because it's all connected.
Yeah, absolutely, and that works both ways. It's not just getting cars off the road and freeing up capacity for freight on the roads, but I'm actually heading to a meeting after this with one of the host railroads who is very excited about the investments that the state is making, because when they are able to increase their capacity for freight, they're also now working with us collaboratively to increase the capacity for passengers, so they can grow freight capacity on rail. At the same time, we're creating more capacity for people to get their cars out of their cars and onto trains. So we're working forward on that. It's difficult. We're working very closely with the Division of Transportation Planning on the CFMP, trying to identify those projects. It's a little bit of a tricky negotiation, because on the highway side, we're dealing with on-system, with with state-owned facilities versus private-owned infrastructure. But we're having very positive conversations with both BNSF and UP, as well as the short line railroads across the state, to identify opportunities to help get freight onto trains and to also increase capacity for passengers.
Thank you. And I just want to second everything that Chairwoman Inman said about increasing ridership and everything that we can be doing to just increase the ability for us to build that ridership and build that same loyalty and trust in an expanding and really wonderful and, as you say, nationally recognized system.
Yes, it's great. It's a great place to be working on rail here in California.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kyle.
right.
Appreciate it. Okay,
Thank you
now
all.
we're going to do our agenda hopscotch to item 59, please.
Yes. Item 59 is an action item to approve a new public road connection. This is a local highlight because this is, because this is for a new interchange right down here in Riverside County. It's on I-215 at Placentia Avenue. So this is Street and Highway Code. Section 100.2 requires commission approval for all new local road connections to access controlled highways, and this new interchange would qualify for that. So staff has reviewed this request, and we recommend approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Tavalloni, a second by Commissioner Dunn. Is there discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Abstaining? That motion.
Madam Chair, will you
Yes.
state for the record that item 58 was withdrawn?
Okay, I'm sorry. Item 58 was withdrawn. So 59 motion has been approved. 58 was withdrawn. We'll move now to item 60.
Good morning, Commissioners. Item 60 is an action item. This is the final EIR for the Port of San Diego 10th Avenue Marine Terminal Redevelopment Plan. The Port Commissioners of the San Diego Unified Port District adopted a statement of overriding considerations, finding that the benefits outweigh the impacts. Staff recommends your approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Tavalloni, a second by Commissioner Burke. Is there discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Abstaining? That motion carries. Commissioner,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
Item 61. Item 61
Hold
is
on, please. Commissioner Norton?
Yes, I'm just going to have to recuse myself from item 61, and I didn't know if I have to announce it before the item is read or after.
Before.
Okay. I will have to recuse myself from this item.
Item 61 is an action item. This is the final EIR for the Metro Red and Purple Line Core Capacity Improvements Project. The Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority Board of Directors adopted a statement of overriding considerations, finding that the benefits outweigh the impacts. Staff recommends your approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Tavalloni, a second by Commissioner Dunn. I heard first. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Abstaining? That motion carries. Item 62, please, Bridget.
Item 62 is an action item. This is the final EIR for the Rice Avenue Grade Separation Project. The California Department of Transportation adopted a statement of overriding considerations, finding that the benefits outweigh the impacts. Staff recommends your approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Tavalloni, a second by Commissioner Kehoe. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Abstaining? That motion carries. Item 63, Terry.
Item 63 is an information item. To provide accountability, the department is required to report on a quarterly basis the status of the right-of-way capital plan, including a list of the projects added, subtotals of the specific categories, and the balance of the annual allocation. Commission staff has reviewed the detailed status of the right-of-way capital plan and will continue working with the department to monitor the plan.
Okay, that was information only. Okey-doke, we're good. Item 64, Terry.
Commissioners, this is an information item to provide you with an update on project delivery activities that occurred during the first quarter. Mike Keever is here to present this information.
morning.
Good morning.
Mike Keever, Caltrans Project Management, and I'm here to provide the first quarter project delivery update. So just start with this foundational slide to set up my slides to come, as well as the additional book items that will be coming before you. What it shows here is the project delivery process, the CTC actions as we go through our project delivery process, where phase by phase, we learn, we update, we learn, we update, we learn, we update, and then we build. So the intent as we're going through this process is to flesh out our issues and try to resolve them before we get to the construction phase, because again, we've talked about this before in our workshops. In the construction phase, we spend about 85 cents of the project dollar. So we want to try to resolve as many of these issues as we can before we get to that phase. At the beginning, we have the most risk and uncertainty. Those risks have costs. Clark talked about the budget. We want to try to put as much of this money into our projects as we can. So what we're working with our project managers for each of these projects is to not program for all of the what ifs, for all of the risks. So as a result, when we have things on some of our projects where we have significant permitting issues, railroad issues, utility relocations, we may not have programmed for all of those risks on that project. And so some of these projects will come before you as a result of that risk assessment. And also, as we have this growing program, you're going to be seeing us more often for potential book item actions. With regard to our performance in the first quarter, basically, it's the first quarter. We've started. We're on track compared to past years, but it's very early. Most of the time, if we can deliver things in the fourth quarter of the previous year, we try to pull those in, even if there is risk in doing that. So our first quarter tends to be lighter compared to the other three quarters. Just want to remind the Commission this year, we will be delivering almost double the dollars that we delivered last year. In fact, the last quarter, the fourth quarter, we'll be delivering almost as much as we did all of last year. So that it's a very significant program of delivery in this fiscal year. Currently, based on our current assessment, we're on track compared to our historical averages. But again, a significant year, challenging projects, and we'll continue to monitor them and report to you on them as we move forward. Looking back at our project costs for the last quarter, so we delivered 4 STIP projects and 48 SHOP projects in that first quarter. The 4 STIP projects were 3% over budget, and the 48 SHOP projects were 8% under budget. And you look at the 5-year historical average, this again is where we're saying we want to try to take more risk so that we can take more of that money and put it into our projects and in a way have less savings. We want to try to reduce that savings and put it directly into the delivery process. Looking at our risks, we meet quarterly with each of the districts to talk about the watch list and where they are in their projects, strategize what to do moving forward. The first quarter, we have about 1,100 projects in the pre-construction phase. So again, we have a big program, right? 1,100 projects. 15 projects, about maybe about 1.5% of them or so, may require a greater than 120 adjustment that we'd be coming to you for potential action. So again, it's part of that learn, update. We may find at the end of a phase, the update is more than 20% of what we thought when we entered that phase. We have 2 projects that may require supplemental to award, and in construction, we have 853 projects. 20 of those projects may require additional supplemental allocations to complete construction. So, and I'll show this in the next slide. We've got $9.9 billion worth of construction out there. So we're talking about, managing these risks, a large portfolio, a lot of project managers, a lot of PDTs, 3,000 projects overall in various phases. And so many resource agencies, stakeholders, partners, but what you're going to see is most of the time we're able to manage these risks and not come back to you. And it's kind of demonstrated in this last slide, which shows kind of the process from programming to allocation, the adjustments that are made with the G12 and the supplementals, and ultimately our expenditures. And it demonstrates, although it's a different subset of projects, this is for the 48 projects we delivered last quarter, the G12s and the supplementals are a very small percentage of the overall program and significantly smaller than the risks that we're managing at any one time. So we are able, with all of these projects, this very large portfolio, all those complications, to successfully manage them, but not all of them. And the ones, you'll see several book items that are going to be coming before you on those that the risks do require us to come forward with a potential CTC action. And that completes my presentation.
Thank you. Do we have questions? You have a question? Yes. Okay.
No,
Commissioner
just on item
okay. So thank you, Mike.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Alvarado.
Terry, I have a question on
sir.
items 75 through, not 65 through 72. Are there going to be any staff recommendations against?
No, there will not be.
Would it be possible to take all of those on one motion? I mean, not that this is going to be a regular habit, but we're just
Yes.
falling too far behind.
Yes, I understand.
So I would make a motion that we approve items 65 through 72.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Dunn. No, yes, Commissioner Van Konynenburg.
I think we should note for the record that there's been extensive discussions on many of these items and extensive questions asked and extensive responses back from Caltrans on these issues, so that the public is aware that
This is not
a lot of
just-
due diligence has been done on these projects.
Any other comments? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Okay, those motions all carry. Now we're going to go to item 76, please. John?
Item 76 is an action item to approve a baseline agreement for one shop project. Staff has reviewed the agreement and finds that it's consistent with the commission-adopted shop guidelines and accountability and transparency guidelines and recommends approval.
A motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Dunn. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? That motion carries. Item 77, John?
Item 77 is an action item to amend the 2018 SHOP program. Note that the change list contains a change to one project and two projects that were withdrawn prior to the CTC meeting. With these noted changes, approval of this item will add 27 new projects and revise 57 existing projects in the 2018 SHOP. Staff has reviewed these amendments and finds that they are consistent with the SHOP guidelines and the commission-adopted TAMP. Staff recommends approval of this item.
Had a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Gardino. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Abstaining. That motion carries. Commissioner Norton?
I wish to recuse myself on item 78 and will be leaving the room.
Okay, Teresa.
Commissioners, item 78 is an information item. This is a program update for the 2016 and 2018 Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program. This is an update that will become the basis for all future allocations for this program. No action is required in your part at this time.
Oh, information, I guess. Well, okay, we're covered, so we're good. Okay, item 79, we'll get Commissioner Norton back. Item 79, Dawn.
Yes, thank you. So item 79 is an action item to consider a project scope change for the Port of San Diego's 10th Avenue Marine Terminal project. The current project scope consists of two components. One is the procurement of a barge-based vessel emissions capture system, also known as a bonnet. The second component is expansion of the existing shore power system to allow for a second vessel to charge. The port has determined the shore power system, as originally planned, will not supply the needed capacity for multiple vessels, and the cost to build such a system is estimated to be $9 million. Due to the significant cost increase, the port is requesting to remove the shore power portion of the project and deprogram $700,000 of trade corridor funds and $300,000 in the local match funds for a total of $1 million. The bonnet portion of the project remains the same and also provides the majority of the air quality benefits, which will still be obtained by completing the bonnet. Staff supports the request and recommends approval of the scope change and the deprogramming of the trade corridor funds.
Quick comment.
I have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Dunn. Yes, Commissioner Kehoe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Don, just to emphasize that the overall air quality improves with these changes, correct?
That is correct. So that there is still air quality improvements with these changes.
Good, very important. Glad the port's doing it. Thank you.
And we did double check with the new shore power rule.
Yes.
And this is not.
It does not impact this project.
That. Okay, good. Okay, we're ready to vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? But abstaining, that motion carries. Item 80, Dawn.
Yes, so Commissioners, tab 80 and 81 are both action items for the Rice Avenue grade crossing project on State Route 34 in Ventura County. Tab 80 is a request to change the scope of the project, increase the trade corridor funds, and modify the schedule. Tab 81 is a supplemental funds request for PS&E and right-of-way. I will take both items together as the scope change is a direct result of the project cost increases. During the PS&E phase, more defined estimates were developed. The cost of the project is now estimated to increase from $79 million to $169 million. To partially mitigate these increases, the City of Oxnard and Caltrans is proposing to modify the scope by shifting the alignment of Rice Avenue to the east and eliminating one connector ramp. The estimate for this modified scope would be $117 million. The original project cost estimate of $79 million was based on estimates prepared in 2017. The key differences between the 2017 estimates and current are in part based on right-of-way parcels going through the eminent domain process and the city assuming responsibility for all utility relocations. More specifically, which I'll have very brief comments here, given the time. More specifically, PS&E is increasing by $3,163,000 to develop the proposed modified scope. Right-of-way is increasing by $15,500,000 due to all property acquisitions now require eminent domain and significant increases in the fair market values. Construction is increasing by $19,007,000 due to utility companies providing the more complete data on cost to prepare relocation plans and the city being responsible for all of those relocation costs. All cost increases will be covered by the state's share of the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program funds, thereby reducing available funding for state-nominated projects in the 2020 Trade Corridors Program by $38 million. Additionally, as allowed for in the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program guidelines, construction is proposed to be reprogrammed from 1920 to the 22-23 fiscal year. Staff recommends that Commission approve tab 80 and 81 for the modified scope, the supplemental cost increases for PS&E and right-of-way, the additional funding for construction, the schedule change, and to amend the baseline agreement. I'd be happy to provide any more details, and then I also know John Belinsky and city representatives are also here to answer questions.
We have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Gardino. Is there discussion? Yes, Commissioner Van Konynenberg.
So I would just, obviously this is a large increase, and it comes out of your share, the Caltrans's share of the trade corridors. I would just, my question to Caltrans would be, had you known it would be this much, would it still have been your highest priority project? And what is the trade-off? What projects are not going to be able to be done from that were on your list because we approved this project?
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. John Belinsky, District 7, District Director. Yes, this would still be our highest priority project with respect to a grade crossing. There's been a significant number of accidents that have occurred at this location, including one Metrolink train that was that hit a truck, resulting in the fatality of the engineer and overturning 4 trucks, or 4 of the cars on the train. So yes, it would be the highest priority, and it's uncertain what other projects would not be able to compete because of this, because we don't have the applications for those projects yet. That next cycle isn't due until the middle of 2020.
Okay.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? But abstaining, that motion carries. Commissioner Norton.
I'm going to walk out of the room for 82 and 83.
Christine, as soon as Commissioner Norton leaves.
Commissioners, tab 82 is an action item to consider the project scope change request for the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority's Metro Orange Line Bus Rapid Transit Improvement Project. Please note on the pink replacement item, the revision of references of an 18-mile segment. On May 24, 2019, LA Metro submitted a scope change request for the Metro Orange Line Bus Rapid Transit Improvements Project. In the original project scope, LA Metro planned to construct a single aerial grade separation spanning over 5 intersections, construct 4 quadrant gate systems at 34 intersections along an 18-mile segment, and elevate an existing bike path. LA Metro proposes to change a scope change to construct 2 separate aerial structures spanning over 4 intersections and construct 1 additional 4-quadrant gate crossing in between the 2 aerial structures. The proposed scope change is more cost-effective and an efficient design that will provide connectivity enhancements with other planned projects in the area: the East San Fernando Valley Transit Corridor Project and the Sepulveda Pass Project. The modification reduces the project cost by 11% without impacting operational benefits and travel time savings. The revised design resulted from evaluation of various configurations of aerial stations, including the connectivity of the 2 projects previously mentioned. Caltrans performed a thorough review and engineering analysis on the revised scope and determined that although the project design will change, there are no impacts to the project benefits. Commission staff concurs with Caltrans' analysis and recommends approval of tab 82 and the pink replacement item.
We have a motion by Commissioner Burke, a second by Commissioner Van Konynenberg. Is there discussion?
Yes.
Yes, Commissioner
Madam
Gardino.
I've had the pleasure of serving on this commission for nearly 13 years now, and it's truly an honor. I've mentioned this before, and I know sometimes it is last minute and it's hard to avoid, but when we get 40-page items handed to us, it doesn't allow us to do justice to reading through information in advance to make the thoughtful decisions that I think everyone depends on us to make. And again, I know sometimes this happens, but I just can't read through 40 pages and be expected to vote when we're handed something at commission hearings. So I want to keep this to a minimum, and I'd just like to be able to communicate with our Caltrans hardworking team and our CTC amazing team about how we keep this kind of supplement to a minimum in the future. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you for your comments, Commissioner.
Is there cliff notes of the changes or a reason why we would get that?
The only reason why we made the changes is to clarify the correct segment miles of the proposed scope. And so a pink replacement was put in place for that.
So maybe we highlight the changes so we don't need to read all 40 pages.
I appreciate it too, because the needle in the haystack comes to mind.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Many of us were out there and looking at it and reviewing it.
Put your mic on, Commissioner Burke.
I think a number of us were out there reviewing it and looking at that particular project.
Okay.
And major change with Orange Line.
Yes. Yes.
Considerable change.
Good. Yes, Commissioner Director Branson.
Commissioners, I would just want to just make sure that you know that Christine worked very hard as I saw her as staff, making sure that what you were allocating here was very clear, the amount of distance that we're talking about. And so in the future, we will ask that those changes be highlighted for you to easily see. It was just more of a technical change that we wanted to be sure was in writing.
Thank you.
Okay, we're all good then. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? That motion carries. Move to item 84. Lori.
Commissioners, item.
Oh,
we still have 83.
Oh, I'm sorry. I grouped those two together because Commissioner Norton was gone. Sorry, my bad. We'll go back now to 83.
Tab 83 is an action item to approve 2 local partnership competitive program project baseline agreements and establish these agreements as the basis for project delivery and monitoring in accordance with the Commission's SB1 accountability and transparency guidelines. The first is the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority's Metro Orange Line Bus Rapid Transit Improvement Project, referenced in tab 82. The total project cost is estimated at $320 million, with $75 million in local partnership competitive program funds. The second is the City of Marina Salinas Multimodal Corridor Imgen Parkway Project. The total project cost is estimated at $42.3 million, with $19 million in local partnership competitive program funds. Staff would like to recognize that Caltrans has been a responsible and diligent partner throughout the baseline agreement process. Staff has reviewed each of these baseline agreements and finds them consistent with the Commission's SB1 accountability and transparency guidelines. Therefore, staff recommends your approval of tab 83.
We have a motion by Commissioner Burke, a second by Commissioner Van Kleinenberg. Is there discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? That motion carries. Now we will go to item 84, and Lori.
Commissioners, item 84 is an action item to consider the project scope change request for the City of Richmond's Yellow Brick Road project in the city's Iron Triangle neighborhood. On October 28, 2019, the City of Richmond submitted a scope change request for the Yellow Brick Road project. This project is an ideal example of a community-designed and community-sponsored active transportation project. It is also primarily a safety and community enhancement project in a very disadvantaged neighborhood where there is already a very high rate of walking and biking. The city is proposing quite a few changes as listed on the book item. These changes are needed for basically 2 reasons. Some of the originally proposed improvements are no longer needed because the issues were addressed in other projects. The other main reason is because the 90% design estimate shows the project costs have significantly increased. To address this funding shortfall, the city secured additional funds for the project. With the additional funds and with some design modifications, the projects will retain the safety benefits as originally proposed. However, some of the enhancement elements, such as some of the landscaping and decorative yellow stamped concrete, will be removed from the project due to the costs. Staff was satisfied that the overall walking, biking, and safety benefits of the project will remain intact. However, staff had concerns that the community would lose the enhancement benefits that the community had worked very hard to design. To address this concern, members of the Pogo Park Community Development Group traveled to Sacramento on November 4, 2019 to meet with Caltrans and Commission staff to discuss these scope changes. The community members assured Commission staff that they have conducted extensive community engagement to inform the Iron Triangle neighborhood of the changes to the project scope and that the community still wholeheartedly supports the project. The project will still provide the walking and biking safety benefits so desperately needed in this neighborhood. Meanwhile, the Pogo Park Community Group is diligently working to find the funding to complete the project as designed. Staff would like to acknowledge Pogo Park members Tootie Maher, Brandon Harris, Doris Mason, Eddie Doss, and Abigail Ramirez, who took the time to meet with staff and show their serious commitment to the project and their community. Caltrans performed an engineering analysis on the revised scope and determined that the new scope retains the walking benefit and safety benefits of the original scope. Commission staff supports Caltrans' recommendation for approval. Staff recommends your approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second, I believe I heard first, by Commissioner Burke. Is there discussion? I'm sorry, what? Yes, okay. Is there discussion? All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Abstaining. That motion carries. Item 85, please, Lori.
Commissioners, item 85 is an action item to approve 2 baseline agreements for active transportation program projects. The first is for the Los Angeles Department of Public Works, Los Angeles River Greenway, West San Fernando Valley Gap Closure Project. This project has a total project cost of over $51 million with almost $19 million in ETP funds. The second is the Alameda County Transportation Commission's I-80 Gilman Bike Ped Overcrossing Project. This project has a total project cost of $61.7 million with over $4 million in ETP funds. Staff recommends approval of these 2 baseline agreements.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Burke, a second by Commissioner Dennis. Or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Abstaining. That motion carries. Okay?
Chair?
Yes.
Again, in the interest of time, on the allocations, if we could bundle 86 through 88, 90 through 94, 97 through 99, 101 and 102, which leaves out 89, 95, 96, and 100 to be heard separate. Could we do that in one motion?
Yeah, if we're not too confused here. So let's repeat then. We're setting aside for now 95, 96, 100.
And 89.
10. How far were you going, Commissioner Alvarado?
We're pulling out 89, 95, 96, and 100.
Okay.
We have some recusals.
Yes, we do. We have a lot of them. So, okay. So
I support the motion.
we have. Well, let's see. Let's make the motion by Commissioner Alvarado and a second by Commissioner Dunn to bundle. Take all of those. Yes, Commissioner Van Konynenberg.
Quick comments. On item 87, in the future, on like 6, 7, 9, and 12, can you add the performance metrics? If it's not clear whether it's a safety projects or performance metrics. And on 91, could Caltrans let us know what their updated flare deployment policy is on item number 91, please, at a future meeting? Those are my only comments. Thank you.
Okay, we will call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Abstaining. That motion carries. So we go first back now to item 89.
Commissioners, item 89 is an allocation request for right-of-way capital for a SHOP project on State Route 55 in Orange County. The project proposes to construct an auxiliary lane on northbound 55 between 2 adjacent ramps to improve operations. Concurrent with the department's SHOP project, Orange County Transportation Authority is implementing a widening project on State Route 55 between I-405 and to I-5. 7 out of the total of 31 right-of-way requirements for these two projects overlap. To limit the inconveniences of property owners and utility companies, the department requested that OCTA deliver the right-of-way needed for the SHOP project simultaneously with the OCTA widening project. In the area where the OCTA and SHOP projects overlap, the cost obligation will be assigned based on the scope of the impacts in a proportional split and consistent with Government Code Section 14526.5, which prohibits SHOP funds from being used to add new traffic lanes to the state highway system. We expect that Caltrans will comply with this regulation as they finalize the cooperative agreement with OCTA. The allocation request from the department is $24.5 million. That estimate was based on the footprint of the SHOP project as it was originally planned. However, the current design of the auxiliary lane has a reduced right-of-way impact. As a result, after consultation with the department, staff recommends a revised allocation of $22.7 million. Staff acknowledges that the department is managing risks with this project, one being the need to acquire property through eminent domain. If that risk is realized and determined attributable to the auxiliary lane scope of work, the department will request a supplemental funds request from the SHOP at that time. Staff recommends commission approval of the revised allocation.
So moved. Second. We have a motion by Commissioner Dunn, a second by Commissioner Tavaloni. Is there discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? That motion. I wish to recuse myself on item 95 as I'm a trustee at the University of Redlands. Okay, I'm back, and I will add to that item 108. So if you will please take 108. My reason for recusing is that my employer, Majestic Realty, has property in the region. Do you want me to take both of them? I have 95.
Okay, we are considering item 95 and 108. Do I have a motion? So I have a motion by Kehoe and a second by Tavaloni, correct? Done, sorry. Any comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries.
And for items 96, 100, and 106, if you want to bundle those are the ones I need to walk out of the room for because of a previous grant with Metro.
Okay.
Do you want to take?
Yes, please, Commissioner Norton. Okay, Teresa, 96, please.
Commissioners, staff recommends approval of item 96, item 100, and item 108. Oh, I'm
106.
sorry. 106. Staff recommends your approval.
So moved.
We have a motion by Commissioner Van Konynenberg, a second by Commissioner Tavaloni. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Okay, we're good.
Yes.
How far are we? 103, okay. Boy, this is fun hopscotch today. Okay, so item 103, John.
Are we batching the time extensions? Yeah.
We can batch, yeah.
So we're going
yes,
to take
that's
103, 104, 105, and 107 as the contract award time extensions. And staff recommends approval as noted on the yellow time extension
So moved.
recommendation.
A motion by Commissioner Van Konynenberg, a second by Commissioner Tavaloni. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? That motion carries. That leaves us with 109, I believe. Lori?
Commissioners, tab 109 is an action item to consider project completion extensions for 3 projects in the active transportation program. These requests are consistent with ATP guidelines, and staff recommends approval as shown on the yellow time extension table.
We have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Kehoe. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? We're abstaining. Now, Commissioner Van Konijnenburg.
Having the overnight to think about it, yesterday on issues of the ITIP, I would ask staff to look at, when in the Fresno hearing, Butte County made a presentation on Highway 7, SR 70. There's been 5 fatalities on SR 70 this year. There have been 22 fatalities on SR 70 in the segment that was discussed in the last 2 years. We take safety very seriously. I would like to have staff go and work with the agency and with Caltrans to see if there's any way that we can review inclusion in the STIP, those projects on Highway 70. I know there's been a lot of work and I know there's been a lot of tumult, but I am still troubled that a safety project that is of the highest priority, that seems the benefits are high, that we can't include it. So I would ask staff one more time to just go back and see if we can have some inclusion on that project.
Will do, Commissioner. Staff will work with the department to see how we can make it work in the STEP, in the
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I think also Tokes told us yesterday that, of his priority list, safety was at the top. So I think maybe we can just have further conversation as we help you achieve that safety goal too. So that'd be great. Okay, I have public comments. Jack Gorman. Followed by John, followed by Rex.
Good afternoon, Chair Inman, Secretary Kim, Director Amasheken, and members of the Commission. My name is Jack Gorman. I'm the Executive Director of the Amador Vintners Association, and I'm here today to speak on behalf of our 42 member wineries, the greater wine industry in Amador County, and in support of the Amador County Transportation Commission with regard to the relinquishment of a portion of State Route 16 to the County of Sacramento. Excuse me. As the major route for interregional connectivity between Sacramento and Amador County, State Route 16, which is also known as Jackson Highway, is a significant artery for commuters, medical services, and commerce. And while all of these factors are certainly a concern for members of the Amador Vintners Association, the importance of this stretch of highway to the economic vitality of the wine industry in Amador County cannot be understated. The wine industry is the major economic driver in Amador County, and Jackson Highway is the main route for tourism to and from both Sacramento and the Bay Area. Negative impacts to wine tourism would be felt not only within our industry, but the ripple effects would be felt with hotels, restaurants, and other businesses across our region. During harvest periods, Highway 16 serves as the primary route for transporting wine grapes and finished wine to and from various parts of the state. Delays in transporting our agricultural products can be devastating to the quality and viability of the final product. To be clear, we are not interested in interfering with any development efforts being put forward by Sacramento County and the associated development interests. We welcome the economic growth to the region. We don't care what Sacramento does with the land that surrounds Highway 16. Our concern is for continuity of interregional travel from Sacramento to Amador County. We care about proper management of this stretch of highway, and Right now, one of our significant concerns is that Caltrans District 3 management have indicated that they will not prepare an analysis of impacts on the highway or traffic for any future projects that are proposed. Given the importance of this stretch of highway for interregional services, tourism, commerce, not disclosing or analyzing the impacts of this proposal represents a failure by Caltrans to further its mission as ignoring to further its mission. We urge you to deny any Caltrans request for funds or approvals for this project until such time that the agency will require a comprehensive traffic study that includes future development projects and mitigation requirements and is required to be disclosed to the public and those impacted by interregional travel along this corridor. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have questions? Yes.
Madam Chair, I would just mention, I think this region is so important that I'm willing to personally lead a fact-finding tour to all 42 wineries.
We would be happy to have you.
I'm a giver that way. I'm a giver.
What a guy. What a guy. Okay.
Pretty bold. Great piece.
Okay.
Okay. We might have the.
We'll get you all set up for your next meeting to be in Amador County.
The committee of the whole.
But you have to drive Highway 16 to get there.
Okay. Thank you. John Gedney? I think all three are probably talking about the same item.
Probably come up in unison.
Okay.
I'd just like to thank you, Executive Director Branson. Thank you so much for your help along the way with this issue. You've done everything you can, and we're going to miss you tremendously. And Vice Chair von Kneinenberg, you've been tremendous listening to our concerns. Just want to thank you, and staff Terry Anderson has been tremendous as well. So just wanted to express our gratitude for your help.
Thank you. Thanks for coming down. Rex Osborne?
Chairman, Commissioners, Directors. I don't have elaborate notes. I'm just a regular guy from West Modesto, live on a little ranch, but I'm the city manager of Plymouth. How many of you been to Plymouth? Thank you. 1,098 people live in Plymouth. In the last 5 weeks, we've had 5 of them die on Highway 16, right there.
Ooh.
Now, what Jack just talked about, he has some passion because he's got vintners and he's got those kinds of things, but I listen to what people have to say. And I'm a relatively new city manager, but let me kind of bring some things to light that I think you know. Mr. Alvarado in Modesto, you said so many things get overlooked because people pass on to new jobs. Things change. We got new staff. We have new directors. We have things that happen. I did not realize that this particular Highway 16 process with Sacramento has been going on for 7-8 years. You know how many people have changed? I learned just today that Sacramento has written a letter to the Caltrans District 3 yesterday or 2 days ago. It says, hey, we're not interested in this anymore. But I today tried to get a copy of that letter through RMJ, and he said, let me review this and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Because he was thinking we're going to come up here and talk today. And I said, this could go away, at least allow us to do something different. You know that how many times, Ms. Kehoe, did you mention San Diego and the problem that we have there today? I counted 7 times you brought up how important that is that we do something. And you know why you brought it up 7 times? To make sure you heard it and the rest of you heard it. Because it's so important and passionate to her. I have 1,098 people in Plymouth that are passionate about making sure that all they want to do is get from Sacramento back to Amador County. All they want to do is do it in an hour versus another 2. And all we want to do is make sure that all the mandates, and I'm not up on the laws, all the mandates that are put forth by this state and controlled by you folks are followed. Make sure we still have that interconnectability. Make sure that's there. And quite frankly, I don't really know what role you folks have in that. I come down here to meet you, and I've met all of you, and I've talked to you. And I didn't talk to you not one time about this Highway 16 project. I wanted you to understand there were people involved. I wanted you to understand that this city of 1,098 felt it was important to send their city manager down here and to Modesto and to San Jose to let you know that we represent less than 50,000 people in the county. This project they want to do in Sacramento, best project I've seen come to Sacramento County. Just think of us. And when you think of us, all I ask, they're going to increase the population of that area, Highway 16, more than our whole county population. We want someone to think of us. And we also would like to see somebody kick somebody's butt and move this forward. 7 years or plus is too long for anybody to wait. You said, Paul, I am not a patient man. You said you were glad that he recognized you were patient.
I'm not patient.
I recognize all of you for who you are, not for why you're sitting here. I know a lot about all of you. I know it because you're important and you're our decision makers and you're the policy makers. And I represent just a small little town. I will maintain relationships with people because it's important. And I'll even come to more of these commissions because it's probably some of the best social networking I've ever seen, because each of you put aside what it is you are and you talk to me like a human being. Very few commissions do that, so congratulations on that. So with that, I'm not going to preach to you about Highway 16. I got Jack to come up and do that. But we will host you for a tour of our communities. And we do have some great wines, so with that. Any questions for me, sir? Ma'am?
Yes.
Just a... in Comanche yet?
I'm sorry?
Are the bass biting in Comanche?
Sir, we like to seed that for you. So you let us know when you're coming up and we'll put 2 bass on a line for you.
Rex, thank you for your passion as city manager on this issue. I'm finding out more and more about key projects like 16 and 70 that was mentioned earlier. I really want us to move the ball forward on issues like this. I really appreciate your frustration and your passion for this. So I'll be looking into how we can move the ball forward a lot quicker. I don't want us to be behind on things like this. It's just it's frustrating for me to even to hear, especially when this starts to involve people losing their lives. So I'll be talking to Amajit soon and see how we can move some of these key projects
Well,
like
thank
16
you. I wouldn't
and
mention my
74.
name right today. I don't think I'm his best friend. Because I just said, why don't you send me this letter? Because it could have prevented us from having to be here.
Yeah.
It's a simple communication skill to take a call.
Yeah.
And I heard that from all of you before, too. Responsiveness. His staff was willing to send it to me. His staff said, I have it right here. But he said, no, I'd rather do it in a day or two. That would have prevented us from being up here. That right there is an internal issue. You guys can deal with that. I'm happy with Caltrans. I swear to God. We got a bike lane in Manteca, or in Plymouth now, 1 block long.
Yeah, look, there's a lot that our district directors have to work on and deal with on a daily basis. But our number one priority, again, I'm broken record here, is the safety of the moving public. So we'll be on top of this.
I love
Yeah.
Caltrans. Don't get me wrong by my comment. I'm saying that Caltrans is probably, if not the most important agency we have in our state, because you protect my children and grandchildren as they travel on these roadways. And I understand it. So our little project is one thing, but so I do appreciate your time and welcome to the state.
Thank you, Rex.
And David. Any questions?
Any more questions?
Thank you so much again. Good luck on your San Diego thing. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
And thank you for coming. We pride ourselves on being the forum where you can come forward. So with that, is there any more public hearing, public comments? Okay, then I believe we are finished. So meeting adjourned.